Innovation Technology Select Committee, Andrew George MP, who's a member of the Health and Social Care Committee, who will be guesting for this session. I appreciate your joining us at short notice. We have a lot to get through, so I'm going to ask you to keep your questions, your answers concise, and I'll try and keep our questions concise, and to introduce yourself the first time that you speak. And so I'm going to start with Ben Lucas. Can you tell me why you decided to pull out of the King's Cross investment, when you first informed the government, and could you start off by telling us that?
By all means, no. Thank you for this opportunity. So my name is Ben Lucas. I'm the Managing Director for MSD here in the UK and Ireland, with Merck & Co. in the US and MSD outside of the US. I am aware at this moment in time this decision has been only just communicated last week, and I do want to acknowledge that I've got a number of scientists who are going through a consultation and a process at this moment in time, having communicated this to them just last week, and I thank them for their patience and engagement as we're going through this process. The decision has been a fair while in the making, I would say. The reality is our company is going through a significant strategic shift as we reach the end of a period of time where we've been quite focused in two areas of business, in oncology and in vaccines on the whole. We have a rich legacy of history in a number of disease areas, and hence the life cycle changes, and as we look to the future, we have a really exciting portfolio. Our late-stage clinical portfolio has tripled since 2021, and we find ourselves in a place where we're having to diversify out into new disease areas. That's meant a considerable set of strategic challenges for our organisation to decide how we pivot resources from where we currently are to where we need to be to invest in the future pipeline and drive sustainable growth for our company. The company is engaged in and publicly declared that we were announced a $3 billion restructuring that was going to happen globally. Yes. We talked about that being done on a division-by-division basis to be able to release those resources and pivot capabilities towards the future. And we also talked about assessing our global footprint as part of that assessment. My research lab colleagues have made the decision that in terms of the early discovery research, they would no longer pursue what had been a long-in-the-making investment here in London. And on that basis, we will see and put at risk nearly 125 of our scientists who we'd started to build. Our plan had been to build up 200 scientists and to occupy this new facility, but at this moment in time, the decision both strategically from a company perspective and where we find the UK in terms of just an ability to do end-to-end business here from a life sciences side of things have been both influential in this decision. So it's a multifactorial decision, a difficult decision. It hasn't been made easily, and we're very conscious of the impact it has on our people and the economy, both locally and in the UK at this moment in time.
Thank you very much. I think we'll come back to look at more detail at the ability for the life sciences sector to do end-to-end business in the UK. I just want to ask a follow-up with regards to the global environment in which Merck is operating and its decision, as you said, to reduce investment globally by $3 billion and workforce globally, as I understand it, by 6,000. So the Merck's diabetes drug Januvia has a current UK list price of $547 and a UK price of $45, which is less than 1/10. And Biden's changes to Medicare's powers, which I know Merck is currently challenging in the courts, provides for a list price of $117, a fifth of what it currently is in the States, but still 2.5 times greater than in the UK. With these prices come into effect from January. So how much is this disinvestment in the UK about the UK environment, and how much is it about the global and particularly the US environment?
Yeah, certainly. Maybe I could correct one thing. So we have announced a $3 billion restructuring, but we've also announced at the same stage that is just a pivot of our resources. So we are going to reduce costs from one area of our business and pivot them to new areas of our business. We're not reducing overall investment on a global basis, but it has meant that when you look at our investments in different divisions and different therapy areas, that will change. Our business is global. It is complex. It's something that goes. The decisions that are made are taken across a number of different reasons. However, I would say on the Januvia front, I think perhaps I can say with some confidence that isn't in any way associated to this decision at all. Januvia is in a different part of its patent life in the UK as it is in the US, and is subject to some ongoing discussions, legal discussions and legal challenges in the US as well. The reality is, and I think you raised 2 or 3 important issues, the reality is that the US taxpayer, US consumers have been funding the vast majority of revenues for pharmaceutical companies around the world for some period of time now, and essentially footing the bill for research and development on the whole. And as you know, the US administration has voiced some concerns about the current balancing of the way that the global pharmaceutical businesses' revenues are raised. I would say, though, with some caution, this is a decision which has been made about our early research and discovery. It's been made as part of a strategic assessment by that division. Our company continues to have 1,600 people working here, many in late-stage development, so clinical trials in patients, in our regulatory assessments, in our medical affairs organisation, our human health organisation, commercially and in animal health. And the continued investment and what we hope for in the future is very much focused around what we think is going on here in the UK. So I think it would be unfortunate for this to be, for any decisions and for these topics to be explained away as simply a function of what's going on in the US. The UK commercial operating environment does need to be addressed, and we find that difficult. And that is in complete end-to-end from our development all the way through to commercialisation of our medicines.
Thank you, and we will now get into that in more detail. Lauren.
Mr. Lucas, he didn't answer your second question about when you first told the government.
Sorry, thanks. Look, the order of this decision being made had been made, we communicated on Monday last week to Number 10 and to the Office of Life Sciences. We felt we wanted to do it respectfully because we've been in connection with the Prime Minister, obviously it's in his constituency, and so we were keen to make sure we informed them. Equally, we have adopted a priority here around our people, and we did not want to play this out in the public before we'd had a conversation with our employees about our intentions. I would say, though, I don't believe any of the topics that we've raised are inconsistent with conversations that we've had with Secretaries of State in any of the major departments over the last year.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Kit. Lauren.
Lovely, thank you. And just to declare, refer to my registers of interest, I'm an unpaid visiting research scientist at the Francis Crick Institute. So could you just confirm that the MSD based at Francis Crick are also being removed?
Yeah, so if I can take a moment to explain our investments at this moment in time.
Yes, they are.
Yes. So subject to consultation, right. As you'll know, we have to go through a proper process. Yeah. We have announced our intent to be able to stop our discovery research investments, which includes our laboratory staff that are based at the Crick at this moment in time.
Okay, that's very disappointing,
yes.
Upsetting. They're on the same floor as me, so I saw them on a regular basis, and they had huge ambition for the future. Has Merck lost its ambition? Just looking at Keytruda, which is one of your main drugs, can you tell us where the origin of that drug came from, please?
Do you mean which company or the history or anything? As you may be aware, I think some of the early research was done through MRC, and in fact there was a royalty payment to MRC for some period of time. As you know, this is a interconnected discovery world, and we rely on those relationships. And I do think it's important to make this point. In no way, and I know I can communicate this from our research leaders, in no way was this a reflection on the science that was being done at the Crick or within our LBIC or with our scientists here. It wasn't a reflection on their work or the value of the science that can be conducted in the UK. Right. I think that's been something we've been keen to be able to emphasise. The opportunity remains, I think the science here remains in very good shape. The challenge for us is about connecting that through the entire ecosystem to be able to find use for our medicines, and on a global basis, making decisions about whether we are going to achieve our goals by having those teams located there. And I would completely concur with you. It is a sad day that we're going to be leaving because we valued the collaboration with the CRIC.
No, absolutely. So, given that this was an MRC-funded project, from many of your huge profits over the last wee while, Keytruda has really made an impact in the business model. So where is a better place to do science if the CRIC and the UK in R&D appears not to be the case?
So if you wouldn't mind, I could just make one small point in terms of Keytruda being funded by the MRC. A small part of the early research was done in the UK, and we know that on the mode of action and then the target that was taken forward by another company. We then acquired that company, and you'll be aware of that story. And there's an enormous amount. Keytruda is a good example of the power of what this industry has to bear. We've done over 1,200 late-stage clinical trials with Keytruda in over 35 indications for oncology. It has totally transformed, I think, cancer care outcomes and for treatments. And so, that is something that I think we're hugely proud of. Look, I'm not here to say there are better places to do science than the UK, but I am here to say that I think is important. We're a multinational company. We're pretty serious and pretty good at what we do. We have huge ambitions for the future in terms of saving and improving lives and branching out into new areas of care and adding new standards of care. But we have made this decision thoughtfully that we think we will be better off not taking this forward at this moment in time. And I think that's about an interconnected system and for the UK to reflect on how we can avoid these things moving forward.
Thank you very much, Lucas. Emily.
Right. Before I go on to ask somebody else, just a quick follow-up question for you, Ben. MSD Animal Health is in Milton Keynes, in my constituency. Are there any jobs at risk in there?
So you may be aware already.
I'm not.
So in late 2023, we also announced the divestment of our animal health business and the full closure of our Milton Keynes site. That was announced in 2023 and communicated, I think, fairly widely to the departments. The technology that we've had at our Milton Keynes site is going to be transferred to Austria and to Spain in order to be able to maintain our business. The animal health decision was slightly different, I will be honest with you. We found operating post-Brexit in a world where the regulations to export product into Europe to our other parts of the supply chain became really quite challenging, and ultimately we had to make that sad decision over a year ago. We are working with UK Land and other departments to be able to make sure that we can appropriately leave that site and help to redeploy the workforce as much as we can. But yes, that decision was taken and communicated a while ago. Well, I'd be more than happy to pick up with you afterwards if you don't feel that.
Yes, I mean, I have met the team on several occasions and, in fact, hosted them and helped facilitate meetings with ministers for that team. I thought that was in anticipation of not closing that site. That's clearly what the local team were hoping for, so I didn't realise that the decision was final.
Maybe we could take that outside of this room. I'd be more than happy to follow up with you by all means. And I'm sorry if any way that hasn't been made clear to you.
Right. I wanted to come to you, Tom Keith-Roach. We've met before and we've had chats before. And I was surprised to see that you're pausing the £200 million development in Cambridge. I know in the past we've talked about cost in Cambridge area. Is this a Cambridge issue or is this a UK issue? And when you say pause, does that mean stop or does that mean you're looking for other locations? In which case we seem to have one available in Milton Keynes, may I suggest. But trying to understand better what's going on in your thinking, in your decisions. Is it related to what we just heard from Ben, or are there other factors at play in that decision?
Thank you for the question. And clearly, when this was leaked to the media on Friday, this is really disappointing and devastating news for AstraZeneca and for our employees. Similar to Ben, this is very sensitive right now within our organisation. As you know, we are extremely proud to be the leading life sciences company and the leading life sciences investor in the UK. We're deeply rooted in Cambridge, but not just there, also in Liverpool, also in Macclesfield. And our teams are really deeply embedded as part of the research environment to the top to the bottom of this country. And equally, I want to say that we as a company are committed to working with the government and with the life sciences ecosystem in the UK to deliver on the sector plan and the ambition to make the UK one of the most attractive places in the world to develop and bring medicines forward for patients. And so this leaked news is clearly extremely disappointing in that context. This was part of a $650 million further investment that we announced as part of the March mini-budget at the beginning of 2024, which involved $450 million for a new vaccines partnership with the UK government in Liverpool and $200 million to develop the South site in Cambridge to accommodate around about 1,000 staff not directly involved in R&D but who support the 2,500 scientists that we currently have in the Discovery Centre on the Biomedical Campus in Cambridge. And that investment is now on pause. I know it won't be lost on the committee, given the history of Macclesfield in 2022 and Speak in January of this year, that there are a number of decisions over the course of the last couple of years which very sadly have either been stopped or now put on pause. The details for those, we've been very transparent about. They're actually independent decisions. For example, in this case, we lost a UK patent on our largest product in the UK, a product called Forxiga, the generic name's dapagliflozin, which has forced us to review our UK footprint. But it's also part of a broader review of our global investment footprint that's currently going on with the board. I think what I would say, and this is one of the challenges which we've been confronting in partnership with government, is on any metric, the UK has one of the richest environments for research and drug discovery in the world. Whether we're talking about research-intensive hospitals or the genomics environment, the data environment, the talent that exists in this country is world-class. And actually, this is an industry in which investment is accelerating. If you look at the total amount invested in the industry in 2022, approaching $200 billion, that's double what it was 10 years previously. And we expect as an industry to invest $800 billion in R&D and innovation globally between now and 2030. By rights, tens of billions of that investment right now should be flowing into the UK. One of the challenges we have, this is not new news, it's been a long-standing conversation, is that building successful high-growth, innovation-led pharmaceutical companies involves taking huge risk in drug development. And actually, if you look back in the history of this industry, there's a long history of companies that have failed and been absorbed. Right? Wyeth bought by Pfizer, Aventis bought by Sanofi, and we as a company were in that position ourselves in 2012. Companies can just disappear. And making those big bets that we do on research does require that somewhere around the world there are health systems and governments which value that innovation in a way that allows our business model globally to be sustainable. And one of the challenges that I think we've had as an industry, and it's not a recent one, this has been building and accumulating over the last 20 years, is that the UK is an increasingly challenging place actually to bring forward that innovation, to get through the front door of NICE into the NHS, to bring forward innovation to patients. We're ultimately motivated to improve public health and patients' lives. And that operating environment, or at least that part of the operating environment, is becoming increasingly challenging. And so whilst it wasn't, let's say, the primary factor in any of those three, I think it would be remiss of me to say in the current global environment that what we are increasingly seeing is discretionary investment and new investment in R&D and in capital manufacturing is flowing into countries who are seen to value innovation and seem motivated to pull that through into patients. and it is increasingly challenging to bring new investment. I've worked extremely hard at that over the last 5 years in an environment which is apparently not, or at least less so. And I do think that is something in partnership with government that, alongside the outstanding research environment that exists here, as
thank you. I think
we need to address.
Let me ask my follow-up question to that, because I really appreciate the honesty of that response, and you'll find a lot of agreement around this table, and something we've talked about quite a lot here. I guess what you're talking about in terms of setting an environment of innovation, absorption into our own health service, and talking about how that's something that has been a challenge for quite some time here in the UK. That comes from the top, doesn't it? How do you find, and others may want to respond to this as well, how do you find your interactions with ministers? Are they at a senior enough level? Are they able to direct that investment into the rest of the system? Where do you think that is at currently?
Look, I want to give a very clear view on this, notwithstanding all the rhetoric that we see in the media. In my view, we are in this together, and we are involved now in a highly constructive conversation with government at the highest level, notwithstanding that this is an extremely difficult moment in history and a very substantial challenge. The issue of underinvestment in medicines has been a continued and worsening trend in the UK. If you look at the data that was presented in Darzi over the last 20 years and over the course of multiple governments and administrations, it is not a quick fix. It is very difficult to resolve overnight, particularly in the current fiscal environment in which the UK finds itself.
Thank you, Mr. Keith-Roach. You're saying that it's good collaboration with the government and engaging in other areas of concern. I think Emily wanted Richard Torbett and Ben Lucas to also just say briefly your relationship with the government and in collaboration.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Richard Torbett, I'm the Chief Executive of the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry. Very briefly, I would echo those comments. Very difficult conversations, but it's been highly constructive with multiple ministers across government. And I would also just echo that we've worked in that way, in a collaborative partnership way with successive governments for many years. We've had voluntary schemes, partnership agreements with governments for 70 years in this country. It's in the recent couple of decades that things have become very difficult, but I would echo what we've heard from Tom here.
And I'd just echo and add to that. We don't feel like we've had a challenge.
The obvious follow-up question then. Yes. The obviously follow-up question. If it is really constructive, and it's been difficult over the last decade, 2 decades, what is happening in terms of the conversations that's going to make it any different now and make it better? It's very difficult. It's been like it for 20 years, but they're very constructive conversations. I mean, it's nice language, but we're interested as a committee if there is a commitment from this government to make the changes so we don't see investment leave the UK. And we're interested in you who are making the decisions on the investment, if you think there will be changes and what those changes need to be.
Those are big questions.
It's a
but
big
just
question,
briefly, each of you, could you respond? You must have thought about this.
I'm very happy to kick it off. I mean, at the root of this is that since 2014, the NHS budget has increased in real terms by 43%. What is less known is that the investment in branded innovative medicines has declined by 10% since 2014. So that divergence between where is the NHS budget going and medicines is at the root of this problem. Really what we need is a concerted effort to turn that around. So we have some specific requests that we put into the government for this, and we're eager to keep talking about
Okay, we'll come back to that in more detail. Ben Lucas?
Yes, so look, I would say 3 things, or 3 to 4 things. There is a chronic underinvestment in medicines. The investment in medicines, the budget spent on innovative medicines has not raised at the same rate that other spend in the NHS has over time, and the UK has dropped down the league tables in terms of spend on medicines, either as a proportion of GDP or as a proportion of the overall health spend. We continue to see a challenge with the undervaluation of medicines, and maybe I could just draw your attention to the fact that the way that all of our medicines come to market have to be assessed for cost effectiveness, as you'll be familiar. The threshold for cost effectiveness, the value that the government puts on a quality adjusted life year, has not moved since 1999, yet in that period of time, our costs associated to running clinical development, I think Nature put it last year, published it, it increased tenfold over that period of time. So there does have to be a serious conversation. That is quite technical, but in principle, there has to be a conversation about undervaluation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I add just one small part, and it was just the connectiveness. I do believe successive governments have demonstrated the way to do this is to connect across the top of departments. Unfortunately, when it comes to the system, the plumbing in the system is not connected. And the lived experience for a number of our companies will be that the promise is there and it fails to deliver because we're not connecting the system up in the right way. I think that will be important to note. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I mean, I echo what my colleagues have said. For me, there are three elements that we need to address, and we're having the right conversation now on all three of them. In the short term, the industry is being asked to pay back to the Department of Health £13.5 billion of sales over the course of the current VPAG scheme. That is what governs the overall size of the medicines market in the UK. And I think we need to come to a sensible resolution on that.
Okay, thank you. You've got two more.
Yeah.
Quickly.
But I also think this is really important. In order to unlock investment in UK life sciences, we have to have some idea of what happens beyond 2028. I think the industry is willing to accept some pain in the current environment, but we need to do that in the context of a clear, shared, long-term plan, which addresses long-standing issues like nice willingness to pay thresholds, and also probably commits to a phased and risk-managed step up from UK investment in innovative medicines, which at the moment is 0.27% of GDP. It really is the bottom of all other comparator countries, in a measured way up towards something which is more around about the middle of the pack. Right. And I think if we do a combination of those three things, it provides the long-term certainty and shared commitment, which as investors we're looking to believe that we can invest in a predictable environment that values innovation.
Okay, thank you very much. Spend a little bit of time on this, but it's useful information response. I want to bring in George now.
We called this emergency meeting because this is pretty serious. It's not just this announcement. We've also heard AstraZeneca cancelling 450 million vaccine projects, pausing 200 million expansion, Lilly pausing their gateway, and Sanofi freezing their investment. This is pretty serious. And we've got the ministers coming in 11 minutes. So this session, we're really trying to understand what is actually going on. There is a view that this is a very effective pharmaceutical negotiation off the back of the VPAG negotiations. They're always horrible. I've done 2 of them. In the end, we find a solution. Is this just a negotiation and the rest of the life science strategy is good? Or, at the end of a year in which the government's been consulting with you, and you said admirably, set out a life science plan, this looks like a massive rejection. So should we conclude this is just a VPAG issue, sort VPAG and we're back to business? Or are you really saying there's an NHS uptake problem, there's a trials problem, there's a data problem, or is this a Trump problem? We really need to understand what it is we should be saying to ministers in a minute that they haven't understood in their conversations with you. Tom and Richard.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right to be concerned. And if you look at the announcements over the last 5 or 6 years, there has been an increasing number of site closures, R&D withdrawals and investments that are put on pause. And I think that is simply a response to the economic gravity of reward for innovation in other jurisdictions versus headwinds here. I do think it's a combination of those three things. It is not just a VPAG issue. In the long term, we see VPAG as a symptom of the problem rather than the cause. It is a long-term commitment to investment in medicines decision. VPAG we can negotiate about. But in the long term, this needs to be a country which is committed to investing in innovation, to making innovation available to patients, and providing a front door through to the NHS through which innovative medicines can pass.
Thank you.
It's definitely not a short-term issue. It's definitely not only about VPAG. We have lost share in global R&D for about a decade. We lost a third of our share over the last decade. I have a list of about 20 examples here over the last 10 years. So this is definitely, 2 examples that happened to come out last week, but this is definitely a long-term trend. I would agree with Tom. We published a comprehensive report on the competitiveness of the sector last week, which if you haven't seen it, we'd be very, very happy to send the committee, where we've really tried to look at all of the factors that drive investment decisions.
Yes. Oh, you have. Richard, what was it that you wanted in the life science plan that you haven't got?
It really is about connecting the market. It's a great plan in many ways.
Yeah, I understand, but this is bad news. What's it missing?
We do need to sort VPAG, because we need to sort VPAG. We need to sort the NICE threshold, and we need to have that sustained commitment to bring the UK up to the level of comparable countries.
In terms of innovation uptake?
This is the single biggest missing piece of the jigsaw. Everything else in the plan is really good. There's more we can do with health data. There's more we can do with many of the research assets that we've got here that you know very well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andrew.
Thank you very much. You've mentioned VPAG a number of times. You've said that it's not, I think, Tom, you've said that it wasn't, it's a symptom rather than the cause. And I just wanted to ask Richard, why did negotiations break down this summer? I noted that you say that the lack of a deal undermines the government's plans for the UK to grow in the life science sector, arguing that pricing is at the core issue holding the UK back. I mean, you there were clearly indicating that VPAG is an indication as to why the UK is failing. So where do we go from here?
Yeah, well, if I can start at the end of your question, where do we go from here? I think it's very important that we start talking again as soon as possible to try and keep finding a solution. The reason that my understanding, the reason that the government took the decision to end the review is that we had reached a point where the positions were very different. At the outset of the review of the scheme, we had a very clear objective to bring the UK back to a position of international competitiveness again. Now, we did work we'd worked in good faith. There was a good collaboration with government, and the government did make a set of proposals to the industry, which included £1 billion into the market over the next 3 years. But to set that in context, it would have still left the industry with £13.5 billion to pay back. Mm-hmm. So at its core, the industry couldn't, in all honesty, agree that was a competitive position for the UK. And so that's why the particular review stopped. Having said that, it's too important to just, to not try again, in my view.
So the conversations are going on then at the moment, or are you not talking?
That particular review has come to an end, but we are certainly keen to keep conversations going, and I feel that we've got constructive relationships with ministers and officials across the world.
No, you're not having a conversation. And we've got ministers before us shortly, in 10 minutes' time. So what should we be pressing them to do?
Our request would be to restart talks with us in order to try and find a solution.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I just want to bring in Tom now, and then it'll be Adam.
Thank you, Chief. There's been a number of things that you've all said as we've gone along so far. Ben, you mentioned about the UK being a commercially operating environment that needs to be, the commercial operating environment needs to be addressed. Tom, you mentioned about high growth needs and high risk. We need a stable sort of market for it. And Richard, you mentioned about international competitiveness. What I want to know is, obviously you mentioned a number of decisions that have been taken over recent decades. How has the UK leaving the EU and the EMA and various other components, how has that impacted on this? And is this something that feeds through to the decisions that you've been taking? Tom?
I don't view that as relevant to the conversations that we're having here. Actually, the challenges in the UK environment are linked to UK policy, which has been in place since 1999, particularly associated with NICE thresholds, which were established actually under a Labour government but haven't moved since then. And then the other piece is escalating clawbacks, which actually until 5 years ago had been counted in the hundreds of millions. in total, but through COVID and post-COVID have escalated now up to $3+ billion per year. And sadly, they've started to become used almost as a balancing item.
Okay. Is there anything you want to add, Ben?
No, the point I made before was, I think, a separate topic. I don't think the EU separation, we work within the policy environment we have, and there are some positives and some challenges, but I would echo, I don't think it's the same.
I agree. It's not the primary driver. There are things related to the EU that we could talk about, but it's not the primary driver of these.
So in the discussions you have with ministers, sort of having access to the European market in a much more easier way wouldn't be something that would help growth in the sector?
Not in terms of the big questions around investment that we've been talking about today.
Thank you very much, Tom. We've only got 5 minutes now, so I'm going to bring in Adam and then Lauren.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, all. Thanks for coming. I want to continue the conversation about the international picture and particularly US policy, focusing on favoured nation pricing and potential pharmaceutical tariffs. Tom and Ben, respectively, how much is Trump's policy affecting your thoughts about investment in the UK? Tom first.
Look, I mean, you're right to acknowledge that this conversation is happening in the context of a broader and very active international conversation right now that's going on around, according to their GDP, trying to make sure, as President Trump has made clear, that countries are pulling their weight in terms of covering the global cost of developing new medicines. I would say that is not a new conversation. Actually, I think that's one of the few issues on which Republicans and Democrats would probably find common cause. And the previous administration's policies around the Inflation Reduction Act were moving in a similar direction. And it's actually not just limited to the US. Similarly, there are conversations in China about funding R&D and medicines pricing. So it's not new, but I do think that the context of the position that the Trump White House has taken has meant that this is a far more active conversation than it has been historically. And I think that is really posing a clear question to the UK from a policy perspective. Actually, the UK, as a sovereign nation outside Europe, has control over its regulator, its pricing and its medicines policy in a way which other European countries don't. And I think the question is, how do we now move forward as a country in that context to improve access to medicines, but also in a way which allows the life sciences industry to attract investment and grow?
Okay.
Yeah, look, I would concur with Tom's thoughts. I'm not going to repeat them. If I might, I think, when we come back to our decision that we're talking about, our decision is not linked to the MFN policies or the policies around we don't manufacture in the UK and export to the US. So it is not down to the decision that we've made from our side of things. Would you mind if I just went back slightly to the question for George before? I do understand it can be confusing because, on one side we're all saying, well, we seem to work well with senior ministers and we have done, and the life science system, the plan works, or it looks like it works. I might categorise it as a credibility challenge. The reality is that we've been having, with successive governments, this continued conversation about the potential of the UK to be able to pull down and realise, from an economic growth way, on the talent that it has. But we failed, and that has been a collective failure across the board. And so, as an ex-UK, a US-based executive team looking into the UK, the challenge I continually get is, well, we've heard that plan before, Ben, but it hasn't necessarily delivered. And the difference is the ingredients are there, but the commitment, the choices to get behind those need to exist. That will unlock, as Richard and Tom have referred to, will unlock the potential to really pull through and maximise on what could be, it is pretty fertile ground on the whole, but it needs to be joined together and it needs to show that there's a commitment, and that commitment needs to be pulled through to be shown it's credible. I hope that's
the other side of the coin to my previous question, looking again at the US, obviously Trump has made some quite significant cuts to publicly funded research. Is that affecting your perspective on investment in the US?
Do you want to address it to me?
Yeah, Richard first maybe.
I could offer a quick response.
Yeah.
I think it's really challenging for the US, those decisions, but I think it's a real opportunity for the UK that we have the potential to grab. Yeah. what I wanted to say briefly is all of the trends that we're concerned about significantly predate the MFN conversation around this year. We're still the largest R&D investor in the country by a long way. We still export almost double what the NHS spends on medicines. That is fantastic for the UK economy. But if we don't point out these sorts of trends that we're seeing right now, the real concern is that we end up losing that edge. We've got such a vibrant startup, scale-up community here. We've got the potential to grow, and we've got the potential to capitalise on some of the uncertainty in the US by really doubling down on life sciences if we get this right.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Joe.
And I just, quick question. Who do we lose that to?
Yeah.
What country is going to pick it up, given the US problems? You're saying we have problems here. What country?
I think there's a whole variety of countries that we're losing out. We're certainly losing out. We're still losing out to the US. We're losing out to Belgium, Ireland, Singapore, Germany. We've got lots of examples of decisions that have been in the balance, and those are the sorts of countries that we've lost out to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are
Very quick.
very quickly.
Very quick. I just want to say there was a meeting in February, an investment meeting where a number of CEOs were present, when the Prime Minister said that he would, quote, sort the VPAG. Right? I don't know if the Merck global CEO was there, right? So there's obviously been a period during which your expectation was that Prime Ministerial promise was going to happen. Presumably your decision, Ben, has come about after that hasn't transpired, or the offer wasn't what you were expecting. Is that right?
Look, it's fair to say that the engagement that was shown by government at that meeting, I think, was cross-department. It was clear, it was unequivocal. There is a clear commitment to get behind life sciences in this country. That was the message that was shared to the CEOs, and the CEOs shared back some of the challenges, and there was a commitment to try and sort that. That's what we've been engaged with. The actual process of our engagement over the last 6 months has been trying to find ways that could be delivered, and that ultimately has ended in failure. So
it just didn't get anywhere.
It hasn't. We can't find a solution for both sides to understandably find a meeting point in the middle at this moment in time. But I, like Richard had said, I would hope that we can continue to work on this, because the prize is large, and the importance of being able to get medicines to patients here in the UK is a deep held purpose for me and my company and my colleagues, I'm sure.
Can I just ask, I'm taking a really clear message from this, that the real problem here is an NHS adoption, uptake, pricing issue in our life science ecosystem. It's not the MRC, it's not all the rest of it's not Department of Bays, it's not OLS. The problem is the NHS and DH policy on purchasing innovation and drugs. Is that that's what I think I'm hearing from you loud and clear.
Do you want to answer?
That's the principal problem.
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. So
That's exactly it.
Okay.
And that's
so
the
are you
message
just
we've tried to
are
land.
you saying that what you're saying to the committee and to ministers and the British public is that the NHS needs to spend more on medicines from its very hard-pressed budget, or that it needs to change the way it spends the current amount on medicines?
I think the NHS does need to invest more on medicines. Sorry, Chair.
Ben, Lucas?
Yes, I believe it does. Can I just say one other part? It's not just about the procurement of medicines. This includes the late-stage clinical trials as well. Yes. The NHS is missing out on that, and that is about investment into the NHS, not about taking money out.
Okay, I'm afraid we're going to have to bring it to a close there. We have the Minister outside, but thank you very, very much for your contributions and for the discussion. And your message has come across clearly to the committee.
And we have a DH Minister about to join us.
Order. Good afternoon and welcome to the second panel and the Select Committee's one-off evidence session exploring the investment issues facing the UK's life sciences. I'd like to very much welcome our ministerial and governmental panel. I shall ask you each to introduce yourself the first time I ask a question. We've had a very interesting session with industry, and that has given us messages that I know the panel members, the committee members want to share with you. I'm going to start by asking a question of the Minister for Science, Lord Patrick Vallance. I do want to point out that Lord Vallance needs to leave at 4:15, so if he stands up and leaves, that is not being rude to the committee. It's pre-arranged that he needs to leave us. Now, Lord Vallance, as I said, we've heard very clear messages from the industry witnesses, which we'll be sharing with you. But you are uniquely placed, Lord Vallance. You were head of global research and development for GSK until 2018. You're a chief scientist during the highly successful public-private development of the COVID vaccine, and you're now responsible for UK research and development. So could you give a quick summary of the issues that you see regarding the UK life sciences sector, particularly with regard to government-funded research and pharma pricing regimes?
Thank you very much. Pleased to have the opportunity to do this. I think if you read the ABPI report, it contains a lot of the things that I think are correct. Not everything, but I think a lot is correct. And it points out that we're very good at basic research. We're very good at aspects of clinical research. We've got some work to do on clinical trials to get them in the right place. There's been a 10-year decrease in performance on clinical trials, which we've got a clear ambition to reverse. We've got some opportunities around things like health data, and I think that's all laid out very clearly in the life sciences sector plan. But the really crunch issue is the appropriate uptake, access and payment on medicines, which is causing an environment which the industry is finding difficult in the UK and is leading to many of the reactions we're seeing. So I think that is where the fundamental issue lies at the moment, and where we need to make sure that we get into the right place. I'm not saying there aren't more things we could do on research and development. There are. And yes, we've got to do a lot on data, particularly the Health Data Research Service needs to get up and running and into the right place. And yes, we need to get clinical trials better. But I think the problem that we're facing now is one that is to do with pricing, access, uptake, and I will add into that the possibility of tariffs from the US.
Thank you very much, Lord Vallance. So just to clarify two points then, are you saying that we need to pay more in terms of pricing to support innovation? And could you just answer that question first?
I think that if you look at what's happened to the overall NHS spend on medicines, it's been in decline as a percentage of total NHS spend since about 2015. Right. And the reason that I think we need to reverse that direction is not just price. I don't think this is about just saying we're going to pay you more. It's about saying we need to make sure that we get rapid uptake of the best new medicines. We have equitable access right the way across the UK. And there probably is a price issue for some of the medicines as well. So I think all of those things need to be looked at. I think it would be a big mistake to say the only thing we need to do is put up prices. It's more than that. And the ultimate beneficiary of this needs to be patients on the one hand and the economy on the other.
And just to clarify, could you tell us when you first heard that Merck was withdrawing its investment?
Well, in July, when they had their quarterly results, and they said that they were going to cut their annual running costs by $3 billion yes. a year yes. by 2027, and make 6,000 redundancies across the world, one had to assume that some of that might hit the UK. I didn't hear about the actual proposals around their withdrawal until the day before, I think, or possibly the day, which is not surprising because these things are commercially sensitive, and they don't tend to tell us about them until they happen.
Did you engage with Merck in the intervening time to understand?
I've had many meetings with industry throughout this. I mean, it's worth perhaps just saying that it's one of the issues about being old. You can remember these things. Not that long ago, 2007, almost exactly the same thing happened with Merck. They'd built a brand new research centre in Turlings Park, and then never actually filled it and suddenly withdrew altogether. So it's not the first time this has happened.
Thanks very much. Kit?
Patrick, you seem remarkably relaxed about this announcement. I have to say the reason we're having this emergency meeting is that we all think this seems to be part of a trend and a pattern of decline of the industry. And so I'm surprised, given that your provenance is from the industry, that you seem so relaxed about it. Is this just one of those...
No, I'm not relaxed in the slightest bit about it.
Right.
I'm not running up and down screaming, because that doesn't help. But I think I'm deeply concerned that there's been a 10-year decrease in the investment and support for a vital industry, vital for the economy, vital for patients, vital for the NHS, and one that at a time when medicines are making a bigger impact on health than ever. You know, I think
I understand all of that, but off the back of Speak, now this, we've got the Lilly freeze and AZ in Cambridge. It's looking like there's a contagion. And I guess we would be hoping you'd come with here's what we're going to do to sort it out. We heard in the previous session that some of this and the timing of this is disappointment following a Prime Ministerial promise made in February to sort out the VPAG, to sort out the pricing mechanism that just hasn't transpired. And so you must have known during the months since then that the industry was extremely unhappy and that therefore there were likely to be consequences. What's actually happened?
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment there isn't a conversation going on, we understand.
Well,
there's a standoff.
I'm sorry, that's not correct. There are regular conversations going on all the time, and I'm in touch with many people in industry, spoke to various CEOs very recently about all of these things. This has been an ongoing discussion. It's not an easy one to solve. And so if you look at what happened with the VPAG negotiations, and it's worth saying that there's been some mechanism like VPAG for a very long time in the UK, and it's always been a bone of contention between governments and industry. And the last scheme got stopped when the rate went up to 25%. VPAG was brought in, negotiated by the previous government together with industry to try and come up with a solution. Unexpectedly, against I think everyone's expectation, it came up with a figure of 23%, which clearly was not what anyone expected. They thought it would be something closer to 15%. Now, reversing that cost money. And what was put on the table was to bring down that headline rate, despite the fact that this was the one that was agreed by both sides, for the government to help bring down that rate to below 20%, to make changes in the way that we value medicines via a change in the NICE discount rate, which actually represents a double-digit average increase in the price of new medicines, and to introduce incentives for companies to if they invest in the UK, to get even more preferential treatment. So there was an offer put on the table, which in the end wasn't voted on by the companies, I think probably mired also with discussions going on with the US. So it's a very complicated current picture. We are determined to solve this. This is not something we're sitting saying, let's watch the decline of the industry. That's what's happened for the past 10 years. People have sat there watching a decline over 10 years. We must not do that. We have to act. It's going to require solutions in all of these areas, and there are ongoing discussions with the US about this as well. So I think now is a pivotal moment. That's why this is an important session today, to try and get this right.
Okay, during those months of discussion then, was it made clear to you that if there wasn't a resolution in a time frame that was short enough, that some of these investments might be under threat?
I think industry has been clear that the ongoing investment in the UK is dependent on having a commercial environment which is conducive to them doing business. And it's quite interesting if you look at the difference in different stages of companies. So where we're doing really well is in companies that are not the big mature companies that are growing. So Moderna has invested $1 billion in the UK. BioNTech has committed to invest $2 billion in the UK and growing. So we've got a series of investments of companies that are on the way up with new technologies. Isomorphic in the UK is probably the leading AI drug discovery company. So I think there are things that are going very well. The bit that needs attention is this question of the big companies and the pricing. And that's what we know. If we don't get that right, the investment won't be there.
If you knew they were unhappy, you knew the pricing mechanism was a problem, you've obviously since February had quite a lot of time to try and get it sorted. You accepted that the equation, the formula, had come up with an unexpectedly large amount. Who's stopping you correcting it?
Well, the offer that was put on the table by the government was equivalent to £1 billion.
But who's making the decision about that offer? Is it you?
No, it's not me. There's lots of people involved in it. Treasury, DHSC.
In a minister, there'll be one person who's making the decision. This is the offer we're going to give.
This is clearly a major area for the UK, and £1 billion offer was put on the table that hasn't been voted on. It's now also.
I understand that. You've explained that already. Who said we're going to make $1 billion offer? Who said we'll make an offer that is not going to be accepted? Is it the Chancellor? Is it the Secretary of State for Health? We're trying to find. I guess what we're trying to do is find the person who's got the levers they can pull to try and change what looks like a disastrous trajectory for life sciences in the UK.
That offer was made by the Secretary of State for Health.
Right. So in theory, at some point, we should have the Secretary of State for Health in front of us to talk about the pricing mechanism and why he's not offering an offer that the industry can accept, and whether he's willing to see the industry decline.
Well, I think nobody is prepared to see the industry decline. There is a question of how much money the NHS can put into this, how much goes on price, how much goes on access, how much goes on distribution, and what the mechanism is to get that into the right place. And I think everybody is focused on trying to make that happen. Plus, of course, we have the question of potential tariffs, which are being talked about at the moment, where we also need to make offers in this direction to try and get things working properly. So it's a very, very live debate at the moment with people trying to fix it. We have Dr Ahmed here from the Department of Health, and you may want to say more.
I mean, if you'll allow me, Madam Chair, I can pick up on some of Mr Milhouse's points. So, the offer was on the table for 8 weeks. There was an opportunity to dissect it, to digest it, and to vote on it. And that opportunity wasn't taken. And at that point, for the sake of operational reasons as much as anything else, certainty, we had to make a decision as to whether we continue to have that offer open-ended or whether we stick to the current offer that was, again, as Lord Vallance says, negotiated only 18 months ago with industry. Our door is still open, not only in terms of VPAG, but on a wider discussion about how we use pricing mechanisms that are evidence-based for clinical benefit, that benefit patients, but also make this a mature and welcoming environment for investment for all these companies. And that's the basis upon which we're working.
Final two questions from me. So was there agreement between the departments about the level of the offer, or did the Department of Health overrule your department, Patrick? And secondly, what was the explanation for the offer not being voted on?
Do you want to answer that question?
Either, Patrick.
Okay. Well, I mean, that was the offer that went in from the government. So, as you know very well, that's the offer that is an agreed offer from the government. And
it doesn't have to be agreed. I mean, the Department of Health, if it's their budget, they get to say, even if you say, we don't think that's enough.
Collective responsibility.
Well, there is collective accountability for things. But in terms of why they didn't vote on it, that is a question for industry. I think you have to ask them that question. Yeah. We were very disappointed they chose not to vote on it. I do think the timing got very mixed up with US negotiations as well.
I think certainly the impression I got from that previous panel was that they could not agree, and that's why the ABPI said that effectively that they could not agree what their position was, and that's why they did not choose to vote on it. But we will come back to them on that. And thanks very much, Kit. I'm now going to ask Emily to pursue questions.
Right. So firstly, welcome Dr Zubir Ahmed to your new role. I'm very happy to see that we have a person with Life Sciences Minister at the Department of Health in that role. We've heard that from industry that there has been a credibility gap between what we say in our life sciences strategy and then what the Prime Minister said at the conference and then what actually happens. I think the actual wording were, credibility problem. How do you see you in your new role actually fixing and squaring that circle and making sure that what we are promising at ministerial level is being delivered to these companies in the way that it has been promised and committed to?
Well, thank you very much. And by way of introduction, I am Zubir Ahmed. I'm an MP for Glasgow South West. I am by trade a surgeon and also a medical researcher. So I'm delighted to be in this role.
We have a vote, so I'll suspend the sitting order. And welcome back to the session of the Select Committee. We had a brief interlude for a vote. We have decided to continue whilst we asked our quorum. And Emily was in the midst of asking Dr. Ahmed a question.
Yes. So my question is, we heard from industry that there was a credibility problem.
Yes.
And I was welcoming you to your new role. And I wanted to understand how you saw your new role fixing between what we say in our life sciences strategy and what we're able to deliver in terms of everything from clinical trials through to potential negotiations on pricing.
I mean, I would divide up my new role both in terms of what I'm going to do in the Department of Health and then also how I partner with Lord Vallance. You know, I think what's really important and what comes out of the Prime Minister's ambitions, the Secretary of State's ambitions and the government's ambitions is that for a long time we've had a National Health Service with varying degrees of satisfaction over the last 70-odd years, but it's never been hand in glove as a national research service. And I think there's now a dawning realisation that those two components need to come together in a way that not only benefits patients, but benefits our economy. And for that to happen, we need to make certain decisions that give certainty to industry in terms of their longevity. And I think we only can do that if we cross the traditional boundaries of government departments, and because the science doesn't stop simply at the door of 39 Victoria Street or an NHS hospital, including Dr Sullivan knows exactly where science starts, for instance. And to bridge that gap, I think it's really important that we work cross-departmentally, and that's why I think for the first time probably ever, you have two ministers in the Department of Department of Science and Health who've got a clinical background, who've got a research background, who understand deeply what's under the bonnet of medical research, and in Lord Vallance's case also has a deep understanding of the industry requirements as well. So I think it's a really exciting partnership.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I've spoken a lot to both of you about my worries about where we were going on life sciences and how we needed to up our game in this. I guess from my perspective, to ask you, to ask you, really, when we look at this, because it's clear that we, as the industry, recognise the ideas are there, the reality is there. Do you think together the two of you can make that case to Treasury to make sure the investment is there, both on the science and R&D side, through to the NHS, to make sure that we see the changes that the industry is talking about and stop losing out to Belgium and Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, sorry,
well, the short answer is yes. We have to make that happen. We cannot afford to lose this industry from the UK. It's very important that we have two large global companies. That matters that it's two. It's very important that we have a very thriving start-up and SME sector here as well. And that's not only important for the economy, it's important for health. And so we must come to an agreement on what the right way forward is from all the other things which are really good and they like. So we have to fix this problem in one way or another.
And just my final question, just because you've raised it as an issue, the tariff discussions. President Trump is landing tonight. Are the two of you going to be involved in any discussions with US officials around the tariff arrangements over the next few days in the visit?
Well, I spoke to a colleague who's been leading on the negotiations, who flew back from Washington this morning, having held constructive talks.
Could we maybe hear something and the outcome of this visit that may improve the landscape in terms of tariffs?
I think it's unlikely over the course of this visit.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just add probably that trade discussions at that level are probably above certainly my pay grade. And I would also just add, you make a very compelling point about how multi-layered these issues actually are. They aren't simply about pharmaceutical pricing in the NHS or our relationship with the commercial sector. They're actually about relationships between two governments and quite significantly shifting geopolitical tectonic plates. So that it is very multi-layered.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Lauren.
Brilliant, thank you. So we heard from the previous panel about the long-term certainty and commitment to medicine innovation. And there's a little bit about reward for innovation and that side of things. So, and you mentioned, Dr. Ahmed, that there would be this long-term plan coming. So I just wondered when we might see the crystallisation of that long-term commitment investment. They also said the life science strategy was brilliant, was well regarded. It's then like, right, what's the longer term commitment? So if you'd able to give us a when, that would be lovely.
Yeah, Dr. Sullivan, always a pleasure. So, I think the long-term plan is the life sector plan, and it's and it's been kind of road tested to make sure it's working hand in glove with the 10-year NHS plan. Mm-hmm. We have the firm commitments where we want to be in 2030 in terms of being the leading life sciences economy in Europe, and by 2035 certainly the third most important life sciences economy globally behind the US and China. So I think now very much with my appointment and Patrick and I working very closely together, it's really about delivery on those components. And the proof points of some of these ambitions are already here in terms of the multi-million-pound deals we've done, to fund Genomics England, to get a health data research service up and running, £350 million for Our Future Health, which is a phenomenal project run by some world-class, clinicians. So the cogs are turning, and Lord Vallance and I to make sure they turn as fast as possible.
Okay, so how can we then ensure that the confidence that there is a longer sustained, so we talk about 10-year plan, talk about 30-year plan, like how, I mean, obviously it's all dictated by the governments of the day, but giving that confidence to the wider sector that actually, I share their ambition, what more do you think we can offer them in that commitment?
Well, I think, we have one of the richest data sets anywhere in the world in terms of its comprehensiveness. I think that intrinsically attracts some of the highest investment in the world to the UK. I think one part of my job is to unlock that in a meaningful fashion. Mm-hmm. I don't think we have got that right yet, but I'm optimistic that once the Data Research Service partnership is set up, that is the vehicle through which we do that. And that in itself will be a hugely attractive to inward investment.
So can I just add one other thing? I mean, I think the fact that we continue to fund basic R&D, we continue to train great people, we continue to have all of those things in place is very attractive to industry. All of those bits remain really attractive, and we must continue doing that. We must get better at the clinical trial bit for the reasons I've said. But the long-term security that industry is now looking for is a pricing and commercial environment that actually they think meets their needs and meets the current political environment where the US is also looking at reference pricing, in essence,
yes.
What happens in other countries. That is the thing that we need to fix now. I think the other things are in good place, and the life sciences sector plan is a very good roadmap that should go on. We should deal with it quickly, but it should actually be sustainable and is not party political.
Thank you, Lauren. We'll move on to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think we're kind of going over the same theme time and time again to a certain extent. My question really is, Zubir, you've arrived really shortly after the car crash that was the VPAG negotiations. And what we hear from the industry is that, the UK is full of potential, there's talent, there's fertile ground, are the words that they use, but we're losing market share globally, companies are moving out sort of stage left, as it were, while negotiations have failed. You're no longer talking, and the question really is that you're saying the door's open, they're saying the door's open, but you're still not talking. So how are you going to get back to the negotiation table, and if you're both wanting this to work?
As I was saying when you were away, this is a very multi-layered discussion. It's now no longer about pricing and what the NHS pays for medicines. It's not even wholly anymore about the commercial conversation. There are geopolitical overtones here, so it has to be managed at a multi-level, and that's what this government is trying to do. Specifically to your point, if this is a car crash, then the car started moving probably about in 2014. So this is a long-standing chronic illness. This is not an acute illness, if I could use some medical terminology.
Of course.
Right? And the conversations, they continue. And we have healthy relationships with a number of large pharmaceutical companies, some smaller ones, as mentioned, like Moderna and BioNTech, AstraZeneca, Merck. All of these companies still have, large footprints in this country, employing thousands of people. And we have health relationships at the university level, at the hospital level, at the NHS level. So to characterise this as somehow that we're hemorrhaging, lots of talent and this is contagion, I think is misrepresentative, because in each case that we have highlighted recently, there have been specific issues with their financial flows, their planning of where they want to have their operations, how they want to cut their own cost bases, contingent upon their own revenue streams with their own specific, headline drugs, and how they want to market them.
But aren't you overcomplicating it, really? They're saying the door's open, you're saying the door's open, but you're not talking. It's as simple as that, isn't it?
So
you need to be just around the same
There are
table.
conversations happening, and it's my second week in the job, and I'm very, very keen to be engaging with industry and pharmaceutical commercial partners, on a face-to-face basis, because I think it's important for me as the Minister to give them show them the whites of my eyes as someone new in the role. So the conversations, are happening, but I think, to characterise this as being simple, I think is not fair, because it is intrinsically complex, because this is about getting the best value for money for patients with specific illnesses in terms of what benefit medicine gives them, and to do it in an accessible and equitable fashion across the country.
Right. So Lord Vallance earlier said that it was about money, basically. It was about pricing. You're saying that it's not simple, it's multi-layered, but and it's not so much about pricing. The key issue we've been told is that the UK spends less on healthcare, 9% of healthcare spend on medicines, while the average is 13%. Can you, if we raise that by 4 percentage points as to the average, it would be, I think, £12 billion. Can you say, what impact that might have on the NHS if that money were to move into pharma spending rather than wherever it is going now?
So what I would say is, the UK's health ecosystem, because of its universality, is difficult to compare to other health systems. I think Patrick and I are in agreement, by the way, that pricing is an issue. What I'm saying is how we deal with pricing is multi-layered in terms of how we demonstrate clinical benefit as we change prices. But in terms of a direction of travel, I think it is reasonable to say in this committee and to industry that we do want to see a direction of travel where we spend more money on novel medicines, medicines that are disease modifying, that prevent disease. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to get a left shift from sickness to prevention, medicines are a core component of that, because the medicines of today that cure hepatitis C, that turn HIV into a chronic disease, that stop you having heart attacks and strokes, are not the same medicines that we're talking about of 20 or 30 years ago, which were treating symptoms. So I think we have to look at medicines in a different light than perhaps we're looking at them right now, and therefore calculate their economic and clinical benefit on that basis.
Right, so I think you're saying that we need to spend more on innovative medicines, but you're not telling me where that money would or could come from.
Well, I think...
Let's move on. I'm going to go to Tom and then to... Sorry, Lauren briefly and then Tom.
Briefly on that point. The last calculation for the dailies, so like the impact on DALYs. I can't remember what it stands for. But that formula was last updated since 1999. Is this what you're talking about, that you may be looking at how we look at the formula for how we assess the impact of medicines in life?
Quality adjusted life.
Yes.
Daily adjusted living years.
Yeah, quality adjusted life years,
Yeah.
So that was a mechanism that was brought into being by really the National Institute of Clinical Excellence in 1999 when it came into being, and it was actually the year I also started medical school. So, and back then, and as it is now, it's a world-leading organisation that can quantify a clinical benefit. And in 2025, there is an argument that I think we do relook at some certain components of how we quantify benefit, not only clinical benefit, but economic benefit from medicines. And
thank you. I think George wants to come in on this.
Thank you, Dr. Torbett. Having been in the industry 30 years, I think we'd agree on a lot of things, not least this sector has come and gone, it's had its highs and lows, and having been in your position back in 2010, we were here, pharma was closing, biotech was on its knees, this happens, and not every government gets it absolutely right, but in that period we did do some big things. One of them was to create an integrated life science portfolio, Office of Life Science set up, working across government. I was lucky enough to hold that first portfolio, and I'm very struck, perhaps we can come to this in a minute, about how fragmented the portfolio has become. But I wanted to ask on this nice question, because it seems to me, and Patrick, you made a really interesting comment earlier, we heard in the first session, unequivocally from industry, the core problem here is NHS procurement, pricing, and I'm not suggesting it's easy, that's what they said. It's not skills, it's not research, it's that. And isn't it time that we really change the NICE model? It was put in place by ministers to protect themselves from horrible decisions to say no. Shouldn't we now be looking at a much more adaptive system that says pathway 1, it'll save money and lives, fast track it. Pathway 2, it'll save lives, could save money, we should test it quickly. Pathway 3, it'll probably save you money, but you need to change your care pathway. We recommend it's implemented quickly and we give approval based on evidence. Isn't this binary yes-no based on an arbitrary quality set in the 90s ridiculous? Shouldn't we be setting out a much more modern, open, international framework for real clinical health economic excellence? And Patrick, you touched on this earlier, and it feels to me like the big intellectual challenge at the...
I think it's a very important one, and the foundation is this move from 9% of NHS spend up. That will happen. So I think there will be an increase in percentage spend in the NHS on medicines. And I think that then raises the question of how do you best allocate that money. NICE has been an extremely good way of making sure we get an evidence-based assessment of medicines against cost. And like all methodology, it's worth looking at and asking the question, what needs to happen going forward. But it's important to look at that in the context of a percentage increase as we go on. Otherwise, you're really stuck, because if it's really constrained, you can't do very much. No. And I think that's the problem that we've been living with over a decade, where we've just watched it. We've watched this go down. It was 12% in 2015. It's 9% now. It's just gone down steadily, and that has to be reversed.
I suppose my key point, because you and I both come from industry, is I think DH, my experience having been there, undervalues the value of time. And industry, I think, would take price reductions in return for speed of validation, speed of data, speed of this drug works with these patients, not with those. That was the promise of our 2010 coalition strategy. But we never broke that, and it feels to me like this is a moment to try and give that offer. We're never going to pay the highest prices in the NHS, nor should we, but we should use it as a research engine to give you better data, quicker access, and better accuracy on who your drugs or devices will work with.
Which is exactly what the Life Sciences Sector Plan says. It says regulation needs to be faster, and I'm pleased to say MHRA really is rising to that challenge and doing it. MHRA and NICE need to be linked, so there isn't this sort of, we do one, we stop, we wait, then we do the other, but we actually try and do things together. So that speed point is important. Second point that's important is speed of access into the NHS. Third point that's important is equity of access. Because at the moment we've got patchy access across the UK. All of those things lead to an increase in medicine spend.
Thank you. I'm going to have to move on now to Tom. We only have 5 more minutes of Lord Vallance's time.
Thank you, Chi. One of my first jobs after graduating was working at York Health Economics Consortium, and one of my frustrations when we talk about QALYs and DALYs is we only ever tend to look at a 5 or a 10-year life, cost-saving period. We know that that's quite frankly, bonkers. If I just take a quick example of my mum, she had breast cancer, had a left-side mastectomy, then chemotherapy, went through a whole thing. She, at the time, had 2 different types of breast cancer in the same breast. She was told that they did genetic testing. It wasn't going to be the case, like it was BRCA, so they couldn't do preventative mastectomy on the remaining breast. But she was told she's almost certainly likely to end up developing breast cancer again because of the fact she's had 2 separate independent tumours at that time. She sensibly asked, can you not do 2 for the price of 1, to put it bluntly, while she was under the knife? And she was told, we can't do that. It wouldn't be within scope of the NHS. But she almost certainly faces the possibility of having to now go through that entire process again, the entire recovery process again, the trauma again. So rather than just arbitrarily trying to increase the threshold of equality, why don't we take into the broader economic impact when we look at that? Is that something that the department, DHSC and NICE might look at and consider? Probably one for you, Dr. Ahmed.
Sorry about to hear your specific case, and to be honest, in situations like that, as a surgeon myself, I do not think we need to get so micromanaging when it comes to that level of clinical decision making that we take away clinical discretion from the individual clinician. There should always be scope in the system, operational and financial, to be able to have those bespoke decision making. Because at the end of the day, what are we doing if we're not able to have at least at some level personalised, decision making? So, I certainly would think in any future, articulation or formulation of economic benefit analyses, there needs to be some level of personalisation, certainly for decisions like that.
Mm-hmm. Then that sort of pivots on to the next question I had, which is for Rosalind. In terms of spending on medicine and healthcare, it's been falling in the UK. Obviously what we've heard from industry earlier is that is obviously having a profound impact on their ability to sort of invest in the UK and the life sciences sector as a whole. What are the plans to address this?
I think we have covered that already. So, we have a really clear set of interventions set out in the Life Sciences Sector Plan, and then there is the conversation about what price we are paying for medicines, which the 2 ministers are very heavily involved with, alongside other ministers across government. So we have both a plan for ensuring that the sector thrives, but also a specific set of interventions that need to happen in medicine pricing.
The plan that we've heard and saw earlier this year, we've heard from industry today that there's not the confidence that some of these decisions that have been taken, a result of VPAG and various other things. Is there any review, any update to that strategy? Is there going to be any further input from industry to try and make sure that the system, the life sciences sector, gets the support that it needs to do its job so well that we know it can do?
Mm-hmm. If you look at the sector plan, it says very clearly that we want to make sure that we have the right commercial environment. And as you've heard from the ministers, we are keen and open to a further conversation about making sure that we do have that. So yes, the conversation is ongoing and will continue to be so with industry. And we will get there. We see sort of absolute clarity across government that we cannot let the life sciences sector fail.
Because what we haven't had is any clarity about where the money would come from.
Well, I think I've just said that I think there will be an increased percentage of NHS spend on medicines.
So that means the money will come from somewhere else in the NHS, so it will come from knee operations, or it will come from cancer treatment.
As you know, there is a fixed budget, and these are all trade-offs. And the trade-off that's been made for the past decade is a lower percentage on medicines, and we're reaping the consequences of that now in a very urgent way, and that's what we need to now address. Sorry.
I know,
I was just going to say, it depends on also how you do it and what slope, what gradient you use. Because if there is a possibility that as medicine spend increases, you're going to be spending less on other things like admissions for heart attacks, admissions for strokes, things like this. There is a way of offsetting your spend that is positive and actually invests in the health service and invests in well-being.
And I think just one other thing to add to that, we are in an extraordinary era of new medicines, both for prevention on the one hand and cures on the other. And so that's really a dramatically different
That's
position.
very true. But I think what we would be pleased to see, and I'm sure that industry who said that they're not confident in the credibility, what we would like to see is a plan that reflects that, so that we can have confidence that is what the future is going to bring. Now I can see.
I was just going to make a comment. I mean, I think we're here because promises were made in February that haven't been fulfilled. Right? The Prime Minister promised to sort the system, and it hasn't happened. And so I guess what we heard from the industry was that they've reached a point where they don't have confidence that all the stuff you've talked about is necessarily going to come to fruition. I guess the question that we're asking is how are you going to change their minds in the short term?
Well, a deal was put on the table that was £1 billion being transferred to them from the NHS. And and clearly we're not there. We need to keep talking, and we need to get to the right position on this.
Could you say, Lord Vallance, which is a question I've asked twice already, when is the life sector plan going to be updated to reflect the current commercial conditions then?
Well, I think
if that will give credibility to the...
No, I think the only thing that's going to give credibility is a financial settlement.
Right, and when might we expect to see that?
Well, there are all sorts of ongoing discussions.
Right, okay. Okay,
there's no Madam Chair, we both have to move a
hang on. I want to be clear about this. The VPAG is one part of this process, okay? Those discussions stopped. There are still many discussions going on with industry about the overall commercial environment. And the VPAG is a very specific UK general manager issue.
We would expect to see the outputs of those decisions, those discussions. We can't get I'm sure you're going to say we can't give a running commentary on it, but we'd expect to see the outputs in an updated life sector plan at some point.
I think the life sector plan is the life sector plan. The VPAC, in negotiations, in some ways, obviously affect it, which is why we're here having this discussion about it. But I don't think, how we negotiate with industry over medicines pricing necessarily would mandate, in fact I would be confident it wouldn't, changes to our overall strategy and aims in the life sector plan. It is with the life sector plan in full view that we are engaging with industry, because we know they're an integral partner to us achieving these goals, and we'll be very happy to come back to this committee once those negotiations have concluded and update you.
And if I might add on that, so the single message that I've had from industry over the course of the last few years that I've been doing this job is about the importance of stability, of having a plan, sticking to it, and then delivering on it. And so I have a very strong sense from industry that they like the life sciences sector plan, they would like the commercial issues that we've discussed today to be fixed, but they're content with.
I agree that in a sense what we've got to do is fix one thing that's said in the plan, not rewrite the plan. Yes. I mean, I don't think we need a new plan.
I have one last question about ministerial responsibilities. We used to have one minister for life science who did the DH bits, the business bits, the office for investment bits. Dr. Ahmed, do you have responsibility in DH for all of the life sciences? Are you the life science minister?
I am.
And do you have responsibility for the NIHR?
I do.
For the drugs budget?
For the medicines budget, yes. The MHRA, yes.
For NICE?
For NICE.
And MHRA?
MHRA.
Great. So you're the key man in Department of Health.
Thank you. I know that Lord Vallance
we both have to go, I'm afraid. Sorry.
I understood that you were staying till 4:30. I know Lord Vallance needs to go, so I'd like to.
I'm really sorry. I do.
Yes, I'd like to release you and keep you. We do have a further question for you.
I can do one more question, and I'm afraid I've got a constituent that I can move.
I have a question.
We need to hear from Martin and Adam.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. This isn't my area of speciality, but I'm missing something. You're saying everything's fine, you're having conversations, there's a couple of things you need to fix. I'm hearing from industry that they're pulling out from investment. These are two very different pictures. What am I missing? I'm
not saying everything's fine at all. I'm saying things are in a very bad position, and they've got very bad over 10 years. They're in a very bad position, and we need to come to a solution with industry. That's what I'm saying. That's what they're saying. And they're saying you're not talking, you're saying you are talking. Well, I am talking. We are not reopening at the moment formally the VPAG negotiations. We're having lots of discussions around commercial environment in the UK, of which VPAG is a small part.
And we're very happy to come back
and we will as soon as
this is it, everybody wants, thank you very much. I know that you have to run. I know that
apologies, and I'm very happy to come back after recess.
And Rosalind Campion can stay for a few minutes. Adam, did you have
my question was for Lord Vallance.
For Dr. Ahmed.
Great.
So this is specifically in your role. One of the big issues that we have is innovation take-up. I did a project with Nesta about looking about prescriptions and how long it takes GPs to start actually prescribing new ones. That challenge is obviously amplified with GPs because they're contractors into the NHS, but it's also, we could talk about NHS trusts having exactly the same issues. What exactly are we doing to make sure that even if we fix the pricing, that there is a 100%. Proper market here for those innovative medicines?
I think what you're rightly pointing at is what I would call the kind of heterogeneity or variation of practice across the country when it comes to approaching the same conditions and why there's so much variation in what drugs are prescribed. And I think what we're going to do to tackle that is really drive forward our ambitions for a single national formulary for England. You know, as a Scottish MP, I can tell you from Scotland, it's had many benefits. And I want to see those benefits extended to England, so there is more equitable access to medicines across the board, because we can give more kind of uniform prescribing, tram lines for clinicians.
Thank you. And can I just confirm, Dr. Ahmed, that you agree with Lord Vallance that spending on medicines needs to rise?
I think there is an inevitability about it over the course of the next decade in our 10-year plan, because the 10-year plan is predicated on prevention. It's predicated on community care and not hospital care. And all of these things need us in government and to empower clinicians to bend the arc of demand and of disease progression. And medicines are a critical part of that.
You see that as it's possible. Your view is that it's possible to do that without taking funding away from other areas of the NHS.
I think if you do it in a proper strategic way, and you have a prevention lens and a disease modifying lens on your medicine spending, I think that is possible to do.
Thank you very much. Rosalind Campion, you spoke about the life sciences sector's confidence in the life sciences plan. As I said, we heard of a lack of credibility, a sense of a lack of credibility. How do you resolve those two?
So the sector plan was developed in partnership with industry and with the NHS, so more than 250 organisations were involved in its co-creation. I think what we heard today in the first session, which I was able to listen to, was a strong sort of sense of these are the sector plan sets out the right interventions. Where I think they have had some questions is about delivery. Those questions are ones that we have heard for the last decade or more, and is based on I think some of the concerns around sector plans in the past. What we did as we developed the sector plan was to put in place clear metrics, clear SROs, and a real sense of how we would know if we had done what we said we would. These things have made it different. So we have a sector plan that is clear about who is going to do it and is clear in its oversight. So I think those things will help us fix the challenges we've had over the course of the last few years on delivery.
So I think what you're saying to the committee is that the clearer metrics will enable delivery, and the lack of credibility that we've heard about this afternoon will be fixed by that.
But also by accountability. So you will see in the sector plan, I joined the Mr. Malthouse's APPG at one point to discuss this. Many of our sector plans in the past have not been really clear about individual responsibility for interventions, and that is something that is very different in this sector plan.
Okay, good, great. Well, thank you very much to all our witnesses.
Could I just say in closing, Madam Chair, I'm very happy to come back once. I appreciate there's a level of uncertainty across the committee, which you want to rightly probe, and I'm very happy to try and come back and furnish you with more answers as we have them on negotiations of medicines pricing. But I would just end by saying the volatility that you see in the pharmaceutical sector right now is multifactorial. I'm not denying pricing is not one factor, but personal commercial decisions of those companies at a global level are also impacting the decisions they're taking in the United Kingdom.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
May I just ask, I know there's just been a reshuffle. Perhaps Ros, as the OLS, could you let the committee have, when it's clear, a breakdown of all the ministerial portfolios that relate to life science? Because the Department of Health says Baroness Merron is also... we'd just like to know who's responsible.
We already have it clear, so really happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Order.